My son's wife sent it to all 14 of us at once, on a Saturday morning, the way you'd send a reminder to a contractor. Ashby Hollow, the private cellar, Mother's Day, 6:30. We've got 14 counting the girls, and you'll cover it like always. I read it twice while my coffee went cold. Then I set the phone face down on the counter and looked out at the apple tree. My husband planted the spring we moved into this house, and I typed back 5 words. Enjoy it. I fly Sunday. My daughter answered in under a minute. Mom, please don't make this weird. My son sent a thumbs up that I understood to mean nothing. His wife sent a single word, lol, which is the closest that woman has ever come to telling me what she thinks of me. What none of them had bothered to ask in 23 years. Not once, not at a single one of those dinners I paid for, was that the estate they had just reserved for Mother's Day had my maiden name carved into the lintel over the cellar door. By the time the steward laid the check in front of my daughter-in-law, every person in that room would know whose name it was, and not one of them would be looking at her. Welcome to Brave Mom Stories. Sit with me a while. This one took me 40 years to be ready to tell. It was a little after 8 on the morning of May 9th, 2026, the Saturday before Mother's Day. I'm 71. I was alone in the kitchen of the house in Glen Ellen that Sam and I bought in 1986, back when this part of Sonoma County still had more gravel roads than paved ones. I poured my coffee black, the way Sam took it, because after 51 years of marriage and 7 years of widowhood, my hands still reach for the milk and then stop themselves. I remembered the year before. Last Mother's Day, I paid $3,800 at a place in Healdsburg. My son's wife chose because a food magazine had photographed the patio. The lamb was overcooked. My granddaughters were on a tablet the whole meal. Nobody asked how my heart was, and I had a reason for them to ask, though they didn't know it. 2 years before that, a steakhouse in the city, $2,900, and I drove the two of them home afterward because my son had too much wine. I have been the bank and the chauffeur and the babysitter for so long that my children genuinely believe those are the 3 things a mother is. I want to tell you about the morning in the doctor's office because it's where this really started. Last October, I was reaching for a bag of oranges at the grocery store on Arnold Drive when my left arm went heavy and the floor seemed to tip. I sat down right there on the linoleum next to the citrus. 3 days at the hospital in Santa Rosa. A small heart attack, the kind, the doctor said, that knocks once politely before it ever kicks the door in. On the morning they discharged me, my cardiologist sat at the end of the bed with my chart open on his knee. Dr. Pruitt, younger than me, gray coming in at the temples, a quiet way of talking. He told me my numbers were good. Cholesterol fine, blood pressure managed. Then he closed the chart and said, "May I ask you something that has nothing to do with your heart valves?" I said he could. "You spent your whole life feeding people," he said. "It's in your history here, the business, the harvests, the family. 2 kids, 4 grandkids, a husband for 44 years. He looked at me. "When did somebody last cook for you?" I didn't answer him. I looked out the window. There was a parking lot, and past it, the gold hills that turn that color in October and stay that way until the rains. He stood and buttoned his coat. "I'm not your minister," he said. "I'm the man who keeps your heart beating. But hearts keep a tally even when the rest of us refuse to. So I'll ask it the other way. When do you intend to start living?" I drove myself home that afternoon. I didn't tell my daughter I'd been in the hospital at all. My son found out 2 months later by accident because a nurse he golfs with mentioned my name in passing. He called me once. I told him I hadn't wanted to worry anyone. He said, "Okay, Mom, but you've got to tell us this stuff." Then he never called again to ask how I was doing. Not once over the winter. 3 days after I left the hospital, I made myself a poached egg and toast, and I sat at the kitchen table where I'd eaten alone for 7 years, and then I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in almost 2 years. A young man answered who is not young anymore. I should tell you who I was before I was anybody's bank. I was born Eleanor Ashby in 1954, in a farm worker camp in the Central Valley, the daughter of people who picked other men's grapes for a living. My mother spoke to me in 2 languages and apologized to white women in both of them. When I was a girl, I was embarrassed by her loud laugh in the grocery line, by her dresses, by the dirt that never quite came out from under her nails, no matter how she scrubbed. I have spent the back half of my life ashamed of that shame. I met Sam Calloway in 1972 at a cannery in Sebastopol. He was Burgundian by way of Quebec, a skinny boy with French in his mouth and a stubborn idea that the hills above Glen Ellen could make wine to stand beside anything in the world. We married in 1975 with $200 and a borrowed truck. We bought 11 acres of rocky hillside in 1981 that everyone told us was too steep and too poor to plant. We named it after my family, not his, because Sam said it should carry the name of the people who actually knew how to make something grow out of nothing. He carved Ashby Hollow into a piece of black walnut himself and hung it over the cellar door, and he cried doing it and told me it was mine. I said it was ours. He said, no, mine. He just got to stand next to it. We were dirt for the first 10 years. Real dirt. And here's the part the comments always want, so I'll say it plainly. My daughter is the reason no one in that cellar knew my name. My daughter was 12 in 1991. There was a girl at her school, the daughter of a man who just bought a glassy house up on the ridge, and that girl found out where my daughter came from. Your grandma picked grapes, she said loud in a hallway, so 3 other girls could hear. You're the grape picker's kid. My daughter came home and cried in the bathroom for an hour and wouldn't let me in. And God help me, I remembered being 12 and ashamed of my own mother, and I made her a promise I've regretted ever since. I told her she never had to be that girl. I told her she could be anyone she wanted, so I gave it to her. When the winery grew, and it did grow, I stepped back from the public side of it. I let people assume Sam ran it alone. I sold my controlling share to a partnership in 1998 and kept a quiet 30% and a clause with my name in it, and I went back to being nobody. A pleasant older woman named Eleanor Calloway, who, as far as her own grandchildren knew, used to help out at a vineyard. My daughter dropped Ashby from everything. She married a man named Kurt and moved to a cul-de-sac in Walnut Creek and told her book club I was retired in wine country, which was technically true and entirely a lie. I let her become someone else. I told myself it was love. Maybe it started as love. But somewhere along the line it became a habit, and the habit became a cage, and the cage was mine. The young man I called from my kitchen table after the hospital is named Mateo Reyes. He came up from Oaxaca at 19 with nothing, and Sam put a refractometer in his hand and taught him to read sugar in a grape, and I taught him to read a room and a balance sheet, and the 3 of us spent 15 harvests covered in purple to the elbows. When Sam's heart stopped at the crush pad in the fall of 2019, fast, before he could even set down the hose, it was Mateo who caught him. Mateo owns the majority of Ashby Hollow now. He's 51. He's quietly become one of the most respected winemakers in the state, the kind people fly in to meet. And 3 weeks before Mother's Day, he drove up to my house with a folder and a bottle and a look on his face I hadn't seen since the funeral. He sat at my kitchen table and slid the folder across. He wanted to buy out my 30% so he could expand. A second label, a teaching estate, a partnership with a foundation that trains first-generation kids to make wine the way Sam taught him. He valued the whole place at a little over $17 million. My share came to $5,200,000. He wanted to close after Mother's Day, he said, out of respect. Respect for what? I asked. You'll tell me when you're ready, he said. Then he set the bottle down. It was the Eleanor Reserve, the flagship wine of the estate, the one with my given name on the label, the one critics talk about in hushed voices. My own children have served it at their dinner parties and complimented the cute name. Mateo turned it so I could see the back where he'd printed, years ago without ever telling me, a single line. Named for the woman who planted the first vine on this hill with her own hands. There's one more thing, he said. The Vintners Guild of America, the Legacy Medal, Class of 2026, Lifetime Honor. The press release goes out the Tuesday after Mother's Day. He smiled for the first time in 2 years. I nominated you in 2023. They've been trying to reach you for a month. You keep sending the calls to voicemail, Eleanor. I sat very still. And come to Beaune, he said. 3 months. We've got the teaching estate in Burgundy ready. Students from a dozen countries. Sam's village is 40 minutes from there. He'd want you to go home to it. I said yes, to all of it. He said, yes, the way you say yes when you've been holding your breath since 2019, and somebody finally tells you that you're allowed to let it out. After he left, I sat on the back porch until the light went red over the hills, and then I drove to where Sam is buried, under a Coast live oak at the edge of the property, and I sat on the bench I had made for exactly this for an hour and a half, and I did not cry. It's time, I told him out loud. I'm going to go see your hills. Now, I want to pause here, just for a second, because some of you are doing arithmetic right now that you've been told your whole life not to do. Every Christmas you hosted, every wedding you wrote a check for, every birthday cake you got up at 5 in the morning to bake, and the total of what you put in does not come anywhere close to what came back. If that's you, leave me one word in the comments, just one. Counted. That's it. I read every one of them. You are not invisible to me, even if you've been invisible to them. Let me tell you what happened in my attic in March, because it changed everything. My grandson is named Eli. He's my daughter's boy, 17, 6'1", and he runs a video channel where he does impressions of his mother that he thinks are loving and that she thinks are flattering, which tells you something about both of them. He came up to stay with me over his spring break, the last week of March, because my daughter had a conference and didn't want him alone in the house. Her text said, and I'm quoting, "He'll be on his phone the whole time, you won't even know he's there. Counts toward your Mother's Day, lol." He arrived on a Friday with a duffel bag and that phone. On Saturday morning, while I was at the market, he went up into the attic. I knew because the dust on the pull-down stairs was disturbed, and the moving blanket I keep over the old crates had been folded back and not put right. He found Sam's cedar chest. Inside it, my mother's canvas work apron, the one she stitched my initials into the week we bought the land. EA. In faded red thread, wrapped in tissue. A photo album from the early years, the truck, the first crush, the two of us black with grape skins and grinning like fools, a stack of magazine clippings, and the photograph. Me, 38 years old, standing in a cellar in Burgundy in 1992, shaking the hand of a man whose name every serious wine person on earth would recognize, signed across the bottom in his own hand. For Eleanor, you'll outlast all of us. Ellie sat up there for almost half an hour. I know, because there was a granola bar wrapper at his feet and the backdoor camera had a timestamp. He came down. He didn't say a word about it. He didn't film any of it. He went to his room and, I would learn later, typed one line into his phone. "Don't post the bit about Grandma." The next morning, I made him pancakes. He sat at the table, not quite looking at me, and finally said, "Grandma, did you ever, meet anybody? Back when you worked at the winery?" I poured warm syrup into the little pitcher I've had since 1979 and set it between us. "A few people here and there," I said. "Like who?" I cut a small bite. "A winemaker in France a long time ago. He was kind to me." He watched my hands. "What was his name?" "You wouldn't know it, sweetheart." He looked at me then. He has Sam's eyes, dark almost to black, and Sam's way of going very still when something matters. "I think I might. Actually," he said. We sat there 2 whole seconds in the quiet. Then I poured him more syrup, and his mother pulled into the drive, and he went home to Walnut Creek. That night, he typed a second line into his phone, which he showed me weeks later at an airport in France. It said, "Grandma is somebody." It was the first time in 23 years that anyone in my family had written that sentence down. He was the first one in all that time to ask the right question. 3 weeks before Mother's Day, I was clearing Sam's desk for the move, and I picked up the leather harvest journal he kept by hand from 1981 until the year he died. I turned to the page for our first real vintage. Tucked between 2 pages, folded in thirds, was a sheet of paper in his handwriting, dated in the fall of 2018, 6 months before his heart stopped. I sat down on the floor of his office to read it. "Eleanor, if you're reading this, I went first, and I hope it was fast, and I hope you weren't alone. Listen to me. The children are grown, and they do not know who you are, because we let them not know, because you asked me to, and I was a coward who loved you and said yes. Do not give them another decade of waiting to be seen. Go to Beaune. The house on the Rue des Tonneliers, number 9. My sister's boy has the key. There's a cherry tree in the courtyard. It is yours. Matteo will know what to do with the hill. He is family in the way our two chose not to be. And Eleanor, wear your mother's apron. She made it so you'd stop apologizing for the room you take up. Stop apologizing. I'll see you at the table. S. I stayed on that floor for the better part of an hour. I did not cry. Then I folded the letter into my wallet, and I called Matteo, and I told him to start the paperwork. 2 weeks before Mother's Day, my daughter drove out alone on a Wednesday. She came in scrolling, kissed the air near my cheek, and sat down to the osso buco I'd made. Sam's recipe, the one I taught her when she was 10, and she's never once asked me for since. I poured her a glass of our own wine. She didn't notice it was ours. I waited until she'd eaten a little. Do you remember the winery? I asked. She glanced up. Which one? You guys worked at a few, right? Ashby Hollow. She squinted, then brightened. Oh, the fancy one Camille likes. I think Dad did the books there or something. Why? I refilled her glass. No reason. I've been thinking about your father. She put her fork down and leaned in with the soft face she uses right before she asks for something. Mom, quick thing. Could I borrow $16,000? Eli needs a car for college visits, and Kurt's bonus came in light this year. I looked at her a long moment. Let me think about it, I said. She left at 9:30. She kissed my cheek again. She never saw the suitcase that had been packed in my bedroom for a week. That night, I wrote a check for $16,000 directly to Eli, mailed it to him with a note that said, "For your future, tell your mother whatever you want to." 1 week out, my son called at 6 on a Wednesday. No hello. Mom, Mother's Day. Camille's got it all set. Ashby Hollow, the private cellar, 6:30, 14 of us. We'll just put it on your card. Easier than splitting it, you always say that. I said, why that place, Wyatt? Camille wanted somewhere with some prestige. She's bringing her folks. My hand went still on the counter. Her father's coming? Russell. Yeah, both of them. Why? No reason, I said. Tell Camille to enjoy it. There was a small pause. He's not a stupid man. He heard something in my voice. He didn't chase it. Love you, Mom. I know, honey, I said, and hung up and called Matteo. Russell Brandt is going to be at Ashby Hollow on Sunday, I told him. Camille's father. The line went quiet. Then Matteo said, very softly, Sam's Russell, the one we carried through the bankruptcy in '94, the one Sam paid a salary to for 2 years when the man had nothing. The same. A longer silence. Eleanor, he said, the universe has a sense of humor. They've ordered the Eleanor Reserve too, I said. Camille told Wyatt she wanted something with a story. I could hear him smile. I'll decant it myself. Friday night, 2 days before, Camille called me. Mother dear, just confirming you'll be there Sunday. She calls me Mother dear the way you'd hold something at arm's length. The reservation, she said, was under Brandt Calloway. She told me to dress up a level. It's not a casual room, she said. It's actually a named room, the cellar, apparently after some original investor. The winemaker's a big deal now. We're lucky to get a Mother's Day table. How lucky, I said. And, Mother dear? A little laugh. Please don't bring up the hospital thing. It upsets the grandkids. Wyatt agrees. I felt the small muscle in my jaw move once. I won't bring it up, I said. I packed that night. The globe-scared suitcase Sam and I took to France in 1979, my mother's apron in its tissue, the signed photograph wrapped in a soft cloth, the leather journal, Sam's letter still folded inside it, the pearl earrings he gave me on our 40th, 3 dresses, my passport, and Matteo's paperwork for the estate in Beaune. I wrote 2 letters on Saturday afternoon and sealed them with red wax, the same brand of wax I used to seal the letters I wrote Sam in 1973 when he went back to Quebec for a season and I thought I'd lose him. 1 letter was for the estate to keep. The other I sealed too, but I also wrote out a plain copy, unsealed, a second sheet, because the steward was going to have to read it aloud, and a man can't read what's locked under wax. I drove both to Ashby Hollow at 9 that night and handed them to Hector Salas at the cellar door. Hector has been the steward there since the day we opened in 1989. He took the envelopes in 2 hands. I'll read it the way you wrote it, Mrs. Calloway, he said. You'll read it the way I wrote it, Hector, I said. And then you can finally stop calling me that. I drove home. The suitcase sat by the door. I want to pause again, just a moment. If you have ever set a trap so quiet that the people standing in it never felt the floor shift, drop one of those little muted speaker emojis below. You know the one. And if your own phone just buzzed with a text asking which restaurant you're covering this year, share this with one person. Just one. You'll know exactly who. Mother's Day morning, Sunday, May 10th. I made a small pot of coffee and read the paper. 3 texts came in around 8. My son, Happy Mother's Day, see you tonight. My daughter, Happy Day, Mom. Eli, I love you, watch tonight. I answered only Eli. I love you too, watch carefully. At 9, I drove out to the oak where Sam is and sat with him half an hour. The hills were green still. By July, they'd be gold. It's today, Sam, I said. Then I went home, showered, put on a navy linen dress and the pearls and low heels, left my wedding ring where it's been since 1975, and at 6:45 the car I'd booked pulled into the drive. The driver was a polite young man. Airport, please, I said. SFO. And, would you mind taking the long way down Highway 12? He drove. We passed the bottom of the road that climbs up to Ashby Hollow at 6:52. I could see the valet stand was busy. I saw my son's wife's white SUV already parked at the front. I saw Eli's gray sedan turning in behind it. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. Airport, I said again, and the young man nodded, and we headed south through the dark vineyards. What happened in that cellar I did not see. I learned it later, from Eli, from Mateo, from Hector, who gave me the longest version because he'd waited the longest to tell it. The private cellar at Ashby Hollow is stone and old oak, with 8 framed photographs along one wall and a long table that seats 14. My daughter-in-law arrived first and asked Hector to save the head of the table for Mother. Hector said nothing. He'd already been told. They all came in over the next 10 minutes. My daughter and Kurt, Eli, my son and Camille, their girls June and Posey, Camille's parents, Russell and Lillian Brandt, Kurt's brother and his wife, and the empty chair at the head of the table. My son asked Hector directly whether his mother's reservation was confirmed. Hector said, Mrs. Calloway's instructions have all been confirmed, sir. My son let it go. Eli sat against the wall, took out his phone, and started recording the menu in his lap. At the top of it, in pale gray italics above the first course, was one line. Ashby Hollow, planted 1981, Eleanor's Hill. Eli read it. He looked up at the photographs on the wall. He looked at the one in the center. He said nothing. They ordered 2 bottles of the Eleanor Reserve at $190 each, the tasting menu for the adults. By the time the bread was cleared, they were past $2,000 and hadn't eaten a real bite. Camille was holding court about a gala she was chairing. Russell Brandt, 2 tables over with an old friend, looked once at the back of his daughter's head and then away. My daughter leaned over to Kurt's sister-in-law, loud enough to carry. Mom couldn't be bothered. Big shock. She's flying to France. Probably watching cooking shows at home in her robe. My son chuckled. Eli did not look up. Camille scanned the entrees. What's this? Eleanor's Braise? Oh, that's adorable, Mother dear's name. I'll have it. She laughed. 4 of them ordered it. The dish Sam named for me in 1990. Russell Brandt set his fork down. He leaned to his friend and said quietly, That's Sam's place. Sam Calloway's wife built this hill. This is her cellar. I haven't been in this room since Sam was alive. Across the table, a woman named Sylvia Penn, 79 years old, was washing the back wall. She'd been a member of this estate since the night it opened. She has a memory like a bear trap. I was at gate 51 at SFO by then, 7:30, the first leg to Chicago, then the overnight across to Paris, then a regional flight down to wine country in the morning. The suitcase with my mother's apron was already in the belly of the plane. I opened my phone one last time. The family group chat was alive with selfies. Camille with a glass of my wine, my daughter making a kissing face, the empty chair behind them all, carefully cropped out of every photo. My daughter had posted to the world, Mother's Day vibes, blessed family. 14 faces. One empty seat at the head of the table. I took off the pearls and put them in a velvet pouch. I didn't post anything. A white-haired woman at the next gate looked up from her crossword. "Where you headed, hon?" "France," I said. "Alone?" she asked. I thought about it. "Not anymore," I said. She nodded like she understood and went back to her puzzle. In the cellar, the desserts were being cleared. Coffee poured. Camille leaned toward my daughter with that confiding little lean she does when she wants her own mother to overhear and admire her tact. It's a shame, honestly. Has she ever really fit a place like this? Bless her heart. My daughter laughed. She tried once at Wyatt's medical school thing. Wore the wrong shoes. Lillian Brandt lifted a hand an inch off the table. "Camille, dear." Camille waved her off, already smiling at her own next line. "Mother dear's never even eaten somewhere this nice." She delivered it like a punchline. The same line she'd used at brunch the day before. The line she'd been delivering, in one form or another, for 8 years. Eli stood up. He walked to the center of the back wall and stopped in front of the photograph in the middle. He read the small caption out loud, just to himself. He came back and sat down. His cousin June, who's 8, pointed at the wall. "Daddy, who's that lady in the picture?" My son glanced over. "I don't know, sweetheart. Some old winemaker." Ellie said it before he'd decided to. "That's Grandma, in Burgundy, 1992. 4 seconds of silence. Then the cellar door opened and Hector crossed the room with a leather folio. He set it down at Camille's place. "Madam, your check," he said, "and a letter." Camille's hand stopped halfway to her wine. She opened the folio. The bill was clipped inside, $4,106 and change. At the bottom, in plain type, "Card on file removed at the request of the owner, May 9th. Her mouth opened. That's a mistake. Hector, who has served 14,000 dinners and waited 23 years for this one, said, "It is not, madam." My son reached for the folio. "Hector, where's my mother?" "On her way to France, sir." My daughter sharp. "What do you mean, on her way?" "She left for the airport at 6:45, Hector said. "Her further instructions are in the second envelope. I've been asked to read it to the table." He lifted it. The wax seal showed her handwriting bleeding faintly through the paper. "With Mr. Reyes's permission, who asked to be here." The cellar door opened a second time. The conversation in the main room, which had been a low murmur, fell quiet by ones and twos. Russell Brandt set his coffee cup down on its saucer very precisely. Sylvia Penn folded her napkin and laid her hands flat on the linen. The room was listening. Hector read from the open copy I'd left him, and he read it slow, the way I'd asked. "Wyatt, and my daughter, and the people you chose to bring tonight. I love you. I have loved you every day of your lives. Tonight you reserved a room with my name carved over its door. You ordered a wine that carries my name on the label, and a dish your father named for me the year you learned to walk. You're sitting in a cellar I dug the foundation of with my own hands in 1981. On a hill everyone said was too poor to plant. The woman in the photograph on that wall is me, at 38, in France, being told I'd outlast better men than the one shaking my hand. He was right, except about the timing. I'm flying tonight to Burgundy to teach for 3 months at an estate and to accept, this coming Tuesday, the Vintners Guild of America's Legacy Medal. The check is yours. I removed my card. I will not be paying for this dinner, or for the next 23 years of dinners I already paid for. Your father asked me to wear my mother's apron. I'm wearing it on the plane right now. Come find me when you're ready to know who I am. Mom!" Hector folded the page and set it on the linen beside Camille's plate. Nobody moved. The door opened a third time, and Mateo Reyes walked out in his work clothes, purple still under his nails, because it was crush prep and the man never stops. He crossed the room and stopped at the head of the table, at the empty chair. "Forgive me," he said, and his voice was quiet, but it carried to the far wall. "I'm Mateo Reyes. I make the wine here, and I own most of this hill. I also happen to be the boy your father pulled off a labor bus when I was 19 and taught everything I know." He looked at my son. "Which makes us something close to family." He looked at the photograph. "Welcome to the cellar, named for the woman who planted the first vine on this ground. She owned a piece of it until Friday. The money from that sale, every dollar, is endowing a scholarship in your father's name for kids who come up the way I did. She's flying to teach in the village where your father was born." He paused and let it land. "Did she really never tell you?" The silence after that was longer than the letter had been. Sylvia Penn stood up. She crossed the room at the unhurried pace of a woman who at 79 no longer rushes for anyone, and stopped at my daughter's chair, her hand resting on the back of the empty seat at the head of the table. "You're Eleanor's girl," she said. "It wasn't a question. I've been coming here since the night it opened. Your mother poured my first glass in this room in 1989. When my husband passed in 96, she held his memorial dinner right here and wouldn't take a cent for it. Did you know that?" My daughter's voice cracked. "He died." "You didn't know that either," Sylvia said, and walked back to her table without raising her voice. Then Russell Brant got to his feet, 73, slow on his knees. He took half a minute to cross the floor. He looked at his own daughter first, then at my son. "Wyatt," he said, "your father carried me through the worst year of my life. 1994. I lost everything, and Sam Calloway put me on his payroll when I had no business being useful to anybody, and he fed my kids out of this kitchen and never once let feel it." He turned to Camille, who had started to cry without sound. "Your mother said something foolish at a dinner 8 years ago, Camille, and I should have corrected it then, and I didn't. And I've been ashamed of that every day since." He looked around the quiet room. "Eleanor, Ashby, fed this valley for 40 years. I'm alive because of her husband. The least I can do is stand up in the room with her name on it." He sat back down. My son tried his card. It declined. He'd been floating 90,000 in pending charges nobody knew about. Camille tried theirs, declined. My daughters came back approved for 1,800 short. Kurtz, approved for 1,400 short. It was Lillian Brant who finally opened her bag, slid a card across to Hector, and said, "Level as you please. Please." Ellie had been filming since Hector set down the folio. He hadn't said a word, hadn't interrupted, hadn't moved. He stood up now and walked over to Mateo and put out his hand. Mateo took it. "Sir," Eli said, "my grandfather taught my grandmother to make wine." Mateo didn't smile. "Your grandmother taught your grandfather," he said. Eli nodded once. "Thank you." He walked past his own mother, who said his name, and he stopped at the door and looked back over his shoulder. "I'll call Grandma when she lands," he said. Then he was gone. He took a car to the airport and sat at my empty gate, hours after I'd left from it, and edited the video on his phone. He posted it at 11:20 with one line of caption. "My grandmother, did she never tell you?" By the time my plane touched down in Paris, the video had 400,000 views. By Tuesday, when the Vintners Guild press release went out, it had crossed 4 million. I landed in wine country in France the next morning. The light came in low and gold and salted off the air, and Sam's nephew was waiting at the small arrival's door, holding a piece of cardboard he'd lettered by hand. "Eleanor Ashby." He saw me and his face broke open into the exact smile Sam used to wear, and he took my suitcase and kissed both my cheeks and said, "Aunt Eleanor, he waited his whole life for you to come." "I know," I said. "I know he did." I turned my phone on. 40-some messages waited. I opened only Eli's. "Grandma, I love you." "I filmed it. Mom's furious. I don't care." I wrote back one line, "Drive carefully." The house was on the Rue des Tonneliers, number 9. Stone walls, an iron gate, and a cherry tree in the courtyard exactly the size Sam had promised in his letter. I stood under it a long while in the late afternoon light. I touched the lowest fruit. The skin was warm. Then I went inside, and I opened the suitcase, and I put on my mother's apron, and I stood in the kitchen of a house in the village where my husband was born, and for the first time since 1991, I was nobody's bank and nobody's secret. I was just Eleanor Ashby, who planted a hill. 7 weeks on, that video had been watched a little over 5 million times. A wine magazine reprinted the 1992 photograph on its cover. My daughter's interior design business in Walnut Creek lost 2 clients inside a month. One of them, it turned out, married into the Vintners Guild board. My son's wife filed for marriage counseling in June to protect the family. Russell Brant wrote me a letter on heavy cream paper and asked if he might visit. I wrote back, Come in the fall. Bring Eli if he'll come. Ellie enrolled in the viticulture program at the junior college back home that autumn. I paid his tuition directly. His mother didn't speak to him for 5 months. He lived in my old house in Glen Ellen until his classes started, and Mateo sent him a set of pruning shears on his first day, with a note that said only, "These were your grandfather's." The scholarship closed at $2 million. It pays full tuition every year for 4 first-generation kids who want to learn to grow something out of poor ground. Mateo runs it. I sit on the board from France. In July, I sent 3 letters home by registered mail, one to my daughter, one to my son, one to his wife. Each one was a single sentence. "You are welcome at the estate any weekday as a paying guest." My daughter didn't answer. My son wrote twice. I read both letters and didn't write back yet. His wife never responded at all. I'm 71 years old. I spent 46 of those years making myself small enough to fit in my children's pockets, telling myself it was a gift to them. It was never a gift. It was a slow apology for the place I came from and the room I take up, and my mother sewed me an apron precisely so I would never make that apology in the first place, and I wore it to every harvest and never once understood what it was for. The day a woman stops translating herself for people who refuse to read her. That's the day she comes home to herself. There's a cherry tree in my courtyard. There's a hill in California with my name carved over the door. The rest of them will find me when they're ready, or they won't. And either way, I'll be at the table, eating something somebody else cooked for the first time in my life. If this reminded you that your name was carved into something, before you ever let yourself forget it, take that as the sign. Leave me a word below, hit subscribe, and I'll see you next time.